Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. What food did soldiers eat? When and whom are you speaking of? Preemptive like, simple history, awesome channel. Almost 4 mil subs. Well deserved. Hi, my name is Connor. I like to learn things. Original link to the video, top of the description, right under that link to the Discord. Click on it, send you right over there. Would love to have you. We're nice. Sometimes. Let's go. Phones away. Even if you're watching on one, toss it.
This episode is sponsored
Ooh, rationing in World War I. I want to see that too.
by Wix. Go to wix.com/go/simple history
Go.
to create a website today. What did soldiers eat?
Bread. Cheese.
Throughout history, the logistical demand of keeping an army supplied with food has been a key consideration for military commanders. Battles and even entire campaigns have been lost on the basis of an underfed army. Nowadays, there are multiple methods by which food can be delivered to troops quickly, as well as innovative methods of food preservation and storage, which ensure that the food they receive is highly nutritious and varied. However, this has not always been the case. Before mechanized transportation
I wish I had that. Can I get MREs like every day if I wanted to? I wonder if you can buy them. Because if I could choose not to eat, I love eating. Don't get me wrong. I love eating. But usually eating is a means to an end. I'm hungry. I need to fill my stomach, so I stop thinking about food. So I eat. I love food. Don't get me wrong, okay? But if I could choose never to eat and just have just the energy, just whoosh, I would do it. And so this seems so good. It's rationed. It's to be somewhat nutritious for soldiers and varied and whatnot. And I wouldn't even have to think about it. And I could just I'm up, heat up the MRE and eat it. I feel like I would like that.
not always been the case. Before mechanized transportation and, in some cases, the advent of proper roads, maintaining regular food rations for an army, especially one that was on the move, was a much more challenging task. Ancient armies either had to carry their supplies with them, live off the land, purchase or steal from local populations, maintain often lengthy supply lines, or, assuming they were lucky enough to come from a civilization with naval abilities, remain close to the sea in order to be supplied. Traditional methods of food preservation, such as curing, pickling and salting, could keep meats and vegetables edible for long periods of time. But nevertheless, food was often monotonous, poor quality and lacking in nutrition. Surviving records of what daily life was like for the average soldier in the earliest known armies are limited, but some information has been passed down to us. In the early days of ancient Egypt, for example, one contemporary writer describes military rations as being meager and unpleasant, while other sources tell us that each soldier was responsible for carrying his own supply of both food and water. As time passed, the life of an Egyptian soldier, at least as far as food was concerned, seems to have become a little easier, and we know they were consuming a variety of vegetables, meats, fruits, and legumes. In ancient Greece, the average hoplite had a diet consisting of barley groats, salt fish, salt mixed with thyme, olives, onions,
Yeah, I'll
along
react
with
to that,
whatever
sure.
else he could loot or
Sorry guys, that's my other video. The I'll react to that, sure. That was... Ooh, that could be cool too.
It's the age-old question.
Okay, continue, sorry.
for it. Olives, onions, along with whatever else he could loot or forage. He was responsible for his own food, which he would get from his domestic stores or the markets. Hoplites were accompanied by a slave who carried the rations along with cooking utensils and bedding.
Isn't that what a squire was?
They were also known to carry iron spits, which could be used to grill meat. For land campaigns, the hoplite was ordered to bring 3 days' worth of supplies. Once these provisions had run out, they would resupply in a city. If it was a friendly or neutral city, they would be able to use their pay to buy more supplies in the market, but if they were in an enemy city, the army would forage their food supplies. This was one of the reasons that land campaigns frequently began in early summer, when the enemy grain was ripe but not yet harvested. Of all the armies of the ancient world, the Roman army was arguably the best fed. At the extent of the empire, Roman territory covered an area in excess of 5 million square kilometers. Keeping troops supplied over the vast distance.
Is that bigger than the US? 5 million kilometers squared. The square mile. So that's, oh, it's only 1,930,510 square miles. So no. I think the US is bigger than that. All right, sorry.
Distances of the Roman Empire was a huge task, but a skill for organization was a major factor behind the success of Roman expansion. We know that from at least the 3rd century BC, Roman soldiers received a standard grain ration on a set day. Although there is a little variation in ancient sources regarding the Roman military diet, seemingly dependent on the location of the army and the goods available, it can be broadly stated that a Roman soldier could expect to receive the following rations: grain, meat, which was mainly salt pork, vegetables, such as lentils and beans, cheese, salt, sour wine, and olive oil. Cassius Dio wrote about the Icenian revolt of AD 60 or 61, quoting Queen Boudica as saying that without kneaded bread and wine and oil, Roman soldiers would perish, whereas the Britons could survive on only grass, roots, and water. The quote itself is almost certainly apocryphal, but it serves to highlight the comparatively high standard of food that could be expected within the Roman army. Whilst garrisoned, a Roman soldier could rely on a centralized kitchen for the cooking of his meals. But on campaign, each contubernium, a squad of 8 men, was responsible for preparing their own food. The grain ration was typically used in one of 2 ways, either as bread, which required a lengthy milling process before being baked on an open hearth, or, if they were in a hurry, as pulse, a type of porridge made from the raw grain. When the army needed to move particularly quickly, soldiers were supplied with a pre-made ration called bucellatum. This was a form of twice-baked bread that is now more commonly known as either hardtack or ship's biscuit. Hardtack has never been known for its flavor or texture, but its ability to keep for long periods of time means that it has remained a staple of military rations right up to the modern era. Although the armies of medieval Europe were, in general, not so well organized as the ancient Romans, a common foot soldier could usually expect to have some basic supplies provided, especially at the beginning of a campaign. When Edward III arrived in France in 1346, at the start of a campaign that would culminate in the Battle of Crécy, he brought with him large quantities of mutton, beef, and pork, both salted and fresh, cheese, peas, and beans, oat and wheat cakes, bread, and dried fish. There are also surviving orders from Henry V telling English bakers and brewers to increase their output in the build-up to the Agincourt campaign in 1415. On a lengthy campaign, though, even the best prepared army could not possibly hope to carry all the provisions they would need, and soldiers were often forced to either purchase supplies from kampfvetelers or look to the surrounding countryside for food. Throughout the Peninsular War of 1808 to 1814, the men of the Duke of Wellington's army were supposed to receive daily rations consisting of 1 pound of hardtack, 1 pound of meat, which was usually beef, and 1/3 of a pint of spirits, which was most often rum. On occasion, these rations were either supplemented or substituted by other goods, although these were not always an improvement. Colonel Jonathan Leach described one fortnight-long march where the only rations distributed consisted of meat and a combination of bran, coarse flour, and straw. The standard ration fell far short of providing the calorific needs of a soldier on campaign, and, to make matters worse, the delivery of supplies was often unreliable. To make up this deficit, soldiers had 2 choices, either purchasing their own supplies or plundering them. The first of these was not always possible, as the pay of a rank and file soldier, even when it was on time, was extremely low, especially after stoppages. As for the second, Wellington, in an attempt to maintain discipline within the army, issued orders declaring plundering punishable by death. This sentence was only rarely given, usually in cases where a soldier had used excessive violence. But men who were caught still faced other forms of discipline, such as having their alcohol ration stopped. Despite the risks, Looting was widespread, and officers, sympathetic to their men's hunger, often looked the other way, including, on occasion, Wellington himself. While actual starvation was only rarely a risk, the food shortages were dire enough to prompt one former soldier to write that on joining the army, a man should have parted with half his stomach.
The Peninsula Wars seem nuts. Suchet, my boy, one of Napoleon's marshals. But it's like the Napoleons, I know Suchet, this is why I liked him so much, is that he was so kind of not barbaric towards the Spanish. And it seems like the Spanish had to fear other Spaniards a lot the most, and there was a lot of guerrilla warfare. And yeah, you'd think that, you know, if you were a Spaniard in Spain during the Peninsula Wars, you'd have to fear the British or the French soldiers, but it almost seems like you had to fear other Spaniards more. Let me know if I'm wrong. Still learning.
Although French soldiers received similar daily rations to their British counterparts, only a few days' supply were carried at a time. Napoleon liked his armies to be quick-moving and self-sufficient, and his men were encouraged to forage or requisition goods. Looting occurred frequently enough that the tactic became known as la maraude, and although this was often forbidden, it was not unusual for a blind eye to be turned. This was a high-risk strategy that worked well for troops in highly populated areas, where goods could easily be purchased, or fertile countryside with plenty of food, but opened up the potential for the army to be left stranded without sustenance. The spectacular failure of Napoleon's Russian campaign, widely regarded as one of the greatest military disasters of all time, can be blamed largely on poor logistics, a lack of supplies, and the Russian scorched earth tactics, which eventually led to the death by starvation of tens of thousands of men. It is interesting to note that the basic diet of Western armies changed very little over the period covered. Salted meat, bread or grain.
Scorched earth is nuts, and it's smart, it's ruthless, but it seems necessary a lot. Of just like, okay, how fine, you can beat us in battle, but how far can you travel through giant Russia, through barren, torched everything, and survive?
Legumes, salt, cheese, beer and wine, with a few variations from army to army, remained the mainstays of the military diet for centuries. This was not because of military planning, but rather demonstrates the types of food that were available in the Western world, and suitable for life on campaign. In the early 1800s, there were major advances in food preservation. The development of canning revolutionized military rationing and, although change was slow to begin with, was ultimately the first step towards the more varied diet.
Franklin expedition, where cans were a pretty new thing. Arctic expedition. Who is it? John Franklin? Franklin. I know it was Franklin. And cans were pretty new, but like the sealant that they sealed the cans had some like lead thing, and they ended up, a lot of them dying from lead poisoning. Check it out. Or like the Terror. Franklin expedition. Just, it's interesting and terrifying.
The development of canning revolutionized military rationing and, although change was slow to begin with, was ultimately the first step towards the more varied diet of modern soldiers. In the 19th century, soldiers had a lot of variation in their food rations. And if you want variation in templates and features for your website, use Wix. Go to Wix.
Guys, make sure to use the /simple history if you get Wix. Helps them out.
/go/simple history.
Cool video. Awesome as always. Simple History. Great channel. Let me know if I said anything wrong, or you can teach me something, or if you learned something down in the comments. Love to see you over on the Discord. Don't be shy. Would love to have you. And I hope you're doing okay. Chin up, all right? Always want to make sure you're doing all right. If not, you'll be good soon. Don't worry. See you guys. Bye.